As dawn creeps over the Paleolithic world, a thin veil of mist clings to the ground, rolling gently through a cluster of trees that have stood for centuries. The sky begins to blush with a pale glow, and within a shallow limestone cave, faint. Orange embers flicker in the dying hearth. A woman bends low, stirring the coals, feeding them scraps of dried grass until the flames awaken again. Sparks leap into the chilly morning air. Nearby, a thin column of smoke climbs skyward, a fragile signal of human presence in an otherwise indifferent wilderness. Outside, a small band of hunters emerges into the cold, each clutching stone-tipped spears still damp from the morning. Their eyes scan the horizon for any sign of movement. Perhaps there will be deer grazing in the grasslands beyond the stand of birch trees, or smaller game hiding among the reeds near the water's edge. Every heartbeat in this moment matters. Each footstep could change the fate of the day, and the clan's very survival. What did these so-called cavemen truly do from dawn to dusk? Were they simply brutish scavengers, driven only by instinct? Or was there something far more sophisticated about their daily existence? For too long, popular images have portrayed them as club-wielding caricatures, dragging their families through a mindless fight for existence. But here, in the fragile light of a new day, the truth is far more complex. The Paleolithic sun sets the rhythm for a world without clocks or alarms. These men and women rose with the day because nature demanded it. There were no grocery stores, no stocked shelves. Hunger was a constant possibility, always pacing in the shadows, forcing these ancient people to plan ahead before their stomachs began to gnaw. And so their day began at first light. They checked their tools, sharpened their blades, and measured their energy against the weight of the tasks ahead. There were children to feed, water to fetch, fires to maintain. The group moved with a careful choreography, each person understanding their role. Fires were more than a warmth. They were shields against the cold, against prowling predators, and against the gnawing fear of darkness that could swallow the unwary. The women, experts in preserving the previous night's embers, ensured the fire never truly died. A cold hearth was a dangerous omen. Rekindling flames from scratch could take hours, precious hours, in which meat might spoil, or a predator might sense human weakness. Fires kept stories alive, too, for around them the clan shared knowledge, tales of spirits, or warnings from long ago. As the smoke rose higher, the hunters moved out, their footprints merging with the countless tracks of animals and ancestors before them. They walked pathways worn down over generations, reading the land the way we read a map today. Every bent twig, every disturbed pebble offered a clue, a code that only their trained eyes could see. What challenges would they face before sunset? Would a hunt succeed, or would they return empty-handed to the worried eyes around the fire? Would rival groups appear, staking a claim on territory or water? There was no guarantee, no safety net, only the land itself and the knowledge passed down from countless seasons before. In these first hours of the day, the Paleolithic people stood poised between hope and hardship. Their minds held astonishing skill, a memory for seasons, an intuition for weather, a deep bond with each other that had kept them alive for millennia. So as the first light of sun warmed their faces, they moved forward, quiet, resolute, and ready. Their world was harsh, yes, but it was also a place of innovation, cooperation, and resilience. These were no mindless cave dwellers. They were problem solvers, artists, strategists, each morning their living proof of humanity's extraordinary power to adapt. And as they disappeared into the early light, one question remained burning. How did these Paleolithic humans fill the precious hours of every day, balancing the delicate dance of survival and community? The answer would unfold as their story and ours continued to rise with the sun. They've been burned into our imagination for decades, wild-eyed, fur-clad brutes clubbing mammoths to death, dragging women by the hair, grunting in caves. Hollywood made us believe these so-called cavemen were little more than animals. But what if this entire picture was wrong? What if these early humans were far more complex, far more human than we ever dared to believe? Long before cities rose from stone and steel, before writing carved history into tablets, humans walked the earth in a world that would look almost alien to us. They lived during what scientists call the Paleolithic era, a span that covers an astonishing 2.6 million years, stretching from the first simple stone tools until around 12,000 years ago, when agriculture transformed the human journey forever. In other words, cavemen belong to a chapter of time that represents over 99% of our entire human story. So who were they really? These weren't some separate species of monster, half-man and half-beast. They were Homo sapiens, people just like us. Their cousins and predecessors, like Neanderthals and Homo habilis, were no mindless beasts either. They shared the same world, faced the same raw fears, and, just like us, dreamed of something more than mere survival. They hunted, they gathered. They formed families. They shaped tools with a brilliance that still challenges modern engineers. Archaeologists have peeled away centuries of misunderstanding to reveal just how sophisticated these early humans truly were. In caves across France and Spain, masterpieces of Paleolithic art, like those at Lascaux, explode in vibrant colors painted with astonishing skill and purpose. These were not mindless scratches, but breathtaking murals that demanded planning, creativity, and an almost spiritual drive to make sense of the world. But art was only one piece of the puzzle. These so-called cavemen built shelters that could stand through bitter winters, maintained steady hearths that offered warmth, light, and safety from prowling predators. They managed resources, organized cooperative hunting parties, and even passed knowledge from one generation to the next. Their societies were bonded by rules, by stories, by a shared sense of identity that echoes what we see in our own communities today. Isn't it strange that for all our modern pride, we so easily label them as primitive, while ignoring how sophisticated their skills truly were? Stone tools, once dismissed as crude, reveal an elegant understanding of geometry and fracture mechanics. Wooden spears were weighted and balanced to travel farther and strike harder. These were technological triumphs born not from brute instinct, but from careful observation, experimentation, and teaching. The Paleolithic world was not a silent, meaningless place. It pulsed with laughter, with grief, with music, with dreams, of spirits dancing in the flames. Archaeological evidence shows people gathering for feasts, crafting beads from shells, burying their dead with flowers and red ochre. These are the acts of humans who cherished meaning, connection, and beauty, not grunting animals. So why did we come to see them as savages? Partly, it is easier to look back and feel superior. Stories of hairy, dim-witted cavemen satisfy kind of modern vanity, letting us believe we stand on the shoulders of giants rather than alongside our own capable ancestors. Popular culture, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, cemented this stereotype, ignoring decades of archaeological discoveries that told a richer, truer story. In reality, the cavemen of the Paleolithic era were extraordinary survivors, brilliant innovators, and deeply social beings. Their daily lives were filled with strategy, art, and a profound respect for nature. They were tested by ice ages, predators, and disasters beyond our modern imagination, and yet they endured, adapted, and even thrived. So the next time you picture a caveman, don't see a filthy brute clubbing anything that moves. See instead a skilled technologist, a brave hunter, a devoted parent, a curious child, a clever artist, a human being, standing at the dawn of everything that would one day become us. This is the story of who we really are, and it begins not in a marble palace, but around a crackling fire in the shadow of ancient stone. Where humanity first learned to dream. The world of the Paleolithic was a place of merciless extremes, a realm sculpted by fire, ice, wind, and water. It was not a single, uniform land, but an ever-shifting mosaic of climates and landscapes, each shaping human existence in ways both subtle and profound. To the north, immense walls of glacial ice loomed, pressing southward during the last ice age, consuming entire regions beneath their crushing weight. Bitter winds howled across the tundra, scouring the land and forcing its human inhabitants to adapt or perish. In these frozen kingdoms, life was a ceaseless struggle against cold and scarcity. Game animals, from towering mammoths to shaggy woolly rhinos, roamed the ice-edged steppes, and for those who dared to hunt them, survival depended on courage, cooperation, and tools honed to deadly precision. Yet moved just a few thousand kilometers, and the Paleolithic world transformed. There, in lands untouched by ice, stretched warm, sun-soaked savannas, vast grasslands, teeming with red deer, wild horses, and herds of bison. Here, life pulsed with a different rhythm. The days could be scorching, the nights surprisingly cold, but food was abundant if you knew where to look. Waterholes and seasonal rivers brought both opportunity and danger. For predators, big cats, wolves, and hyenas also gathered to drink. It was in these lands that humans learned to read. Subtle signs, a broken twig, a faint track, a shifting wind. Every clue meant the difference between feast and famine, along the coasts and near the great river valleys. Another Paleolithic theater unfolded, one of Marsh's estuaries, and crashing. Surf, shellfish, fish, waterfowl, all could be gathered if you understood their habits and the tides. The steady supply of protein from these waterways may have been crucial to the growth of human brains, shaping the very evolution of our species. But coastal life carried its own perils. Storms that smashed entire camps to splinters, sudden floods that erased years of settlement overnight, and the constant risk of exposure to disease from stagnant waters. Across each of these environments, geography dictated everything from what people wore to what they ate to how they lived together. In the north, heavy furs and layered clothing were essential. Fire was sacred, a fragile lifeline in the darkness. Shelter might mean a cave with a smoky hearth, or a windbreak made of mammoth bones and hides. But on the open savanna, the human silhouette had to move lightly and quickly, tracking prey across miles of grass. In coastal wetlands, humans became architects of reed shelters, basket traps, and simple boats that let them harvest the sea's gifts. Can you imagine trying to survive in a world where a single mistake, a wrong step, a forgotten spark could end everything? The Paleolithic environment was not merely a backdrop. It was the ever-present force that molded human life. It decided who thrived and who fell. It demanded ingenuity, teaching early humans to observe, to remember, to cooperate, because no single person could outlast the wilderness alone. Archaeologists have found breathtaking evidence of these adaptations: flint blades perfectly crafted to cut through thick mammoth hide, fish hooks carved from bone near coastal sites, intricate traps designed to bring down fleet-footed gazelles in the open plains. Each artifact tells a silent story of our ancestors wrestling with the land, trying to bend it to their will, and, just as often, being humbled by its power. When you picture the Paleolithic, think not of a static, primitive world, but of a living, breathing planet in constant motion. Climate shifted, advanced, and retreated. Rivers changed their course, and our ancestors had to follow, building new knowledge on each migration, carrying the lessons of one environment to face the next. The world itself was their greatest teacher, ruthless, yes, but also rich with opportunity. In the Paleolithic, survival was a daily conversation between humans and their environment. Each day began with a question: where is the food? Where is the shelter? And each night ended with gratitude that once again they had found a way to endure. And so, as the Ice Age deepened and new challenges appeared on the horizon, these ancient humans would draw on the same skills and courage that had carried them through countless trials before. Because in the Paleolithic, the world belonged only to those who could adapt. They gathered around a fragile glow as night fell heavy over the Paleolithic landscape. In a world ruled by darkness and cold, the fire was more than light. It was life itself. Its flickering dance upon the rough cave walls offered warmth, safety, and a small circle of order in a wilderness that knew no mercy. But keeping that flame alive was no easy task. It demanded vigilance, skill, and respect, for in these ancient times, a single ember could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. The people of the Upper Paleolithic, some 30,000 years ago, had already learned that fire was the beating heart of their community. They guarded it with fierce dedication, passing down the knowledge of fire maintenance from one generation to the next. Sparks were precious, ignited by striking flint against pyrite or, in some places, by spinning a wooden drill until the friction called forth a wisp of smoke. But the real challenge came not only in starting the fire, but in keeping it alive through the long, merciless night. Imagine them hunched against the chill, tending glowing embers that had to survive until dawn. A moment of carelessness, a gust of damp wind, and all would be lost. How would they warm their food, their children, or their own bodies in a world where temperatures could plunge to deadly lows? How would they keep predators at bay when the darkness seemed to conspire with every hungry beast? In this way, the hearth was more than a tool. It was a fortress of flame, around which trust and cooperation grew. Archaeological sites across Europe and Asia revealed charred animal bones, blackened hearthstones, and thick layers of ash, silent witnesses to thousands of Paleolithic meals. At places like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic or Pinsevent in France, evidence shows how entire families gathered around these fires, roasting mammoth, horse, or reindeer meat, while retelling stories of hunts and hardships. Smoke rose with the aroma of charred flesh, drifting into the night as a testament to human ingenuity. Fire transformed raw meat into nourishment, killing parasites, breaking down fibers, and unlocking vital calories their bodies so desperately needed. Without it, many would not have survived. But the fire was more than a stove. It was the center of social life, a stage for storytelling, for ritual, for comfort against the terror of the unknown. Children dozed close to the warmth, while elders recounted the deeds of ancestors long gone. Here, bonds were forged, knowledge was shared, and songs were born in the orange glow of the flames. One can almost hear the quiet murmur of voices, the hiss of burning wood, the gentle breath of a child asleep beside the hearth. Could any modern family feel as connected as these early bands of humans who depended so completely on each other and their precious flame? In the morning, the first to rise would carefully stir the ashes, coaxing a hidden coal back to life, feeding it with dry grass and breath. This simple ritual, repeated every day, was as vital as hunting or gathering. Itself, to fail at it was to invite hunger, fear, and perhaps death. Fire was memory. Fire was belonging. Fire was hope. If we think of these ancestors as cavemen, let us also remember them as the guardians of a miracle, protectors of light against an endless night. Around their hearths, they wove the earliest threads of community, giving new shape to what would become human culture. It was here, at the center of their world, that they dreamed of tomorrow. And so, in a Paleolithic night, with wolves howling beyond the circle of firelight, our ancestors stared into the embers, resolved to keep them alive. Their flickering flame was not merely survival, but a declaration that even in the harshest world, humanity could gather, could share, and could endure. They rose with the dawn when the world still wore a veil of mist and the air was sharp enough to bite the skin. For Paleolithic people, each new day was a gamble against hunger. It was a challenge as old as humanity itself, a challenge that demanded courage, skill, and, above all, unity. Because to feed the clan, every man, woman, and child had a role to play. Their food quest was not merely survival. It was a ritual, a dance of life and death repeated across the ages. In the hush of early morning, hunters prepared for the chase. These were not wild, unthinking brutes, as stereotypes might have us believe. They were strategic, patient, and deeply observant. Spears tipped with sharpened stone, outlaws throwing sticks that gave deadly force to a spear. These were the tools of Paleolithic ingenuity. Some hunted in pairs, others in larger coordinated groups, studying the wind, following the faintest trail left by a deer or an aurochs, a wild ancestor of modern cattle. They read the land the way we might read a map: hoofprints, broken twigs, droppings, all whispered clues. But hunting was only one side of the food story. While some tracked prey across dangerous ground, women and children fanned out across the meadows and woodlands to gather the world's oldest harvest, plants. They knew precisely which berries could nourish and which would kill. Roots, tubers, wild grains, nuts, these were their treasures. A mother might teach her daughter to recognize the serrated leaves of sorrel, or to dig carefully for edible bulbs buried deep in the soil. These skills were the foundation of the group's survival, passed down across countless generations. Can you picture it? The rhythmic crack of wooden digging sticks in the earth, the bright flash of berries in the morning light, the smell of crushed herbs mingling with fresh mud. This was not a static existence, but one shaped by the rhythm of the seasons. In the spring, tender shoots and new leaves made foraging plentiful. Summer brought sweet fruits and ripening seeds. Autumn offered a final burst of nuts and berries before winter's iron grip closed around the land. And when the cold months came, stores of dried meat and smoked fish were guarded like gold, ensuring that no one starved. The Paleolithic food quest was not a solo act. It was communal, fiercely so. Picture a successful hunt returning to camp. The men hauling a heavy carcass, their faces smeared with sweat and blood, muscles trembling from exhaustion. Instead of hoarding their prize, they shared it. The best. Cuts were divided among families, the bones cracked for marrow, the hide destined for clothing or shelter. This sharing was not just practical, it was sacred, a bond that held the group together. A child who was too young to hunt still shared in the feast, as did the elderly, whose wisdom and stories guided the tribe. Modern archaeologists have uncovered signs of this generosity. Cut marks on bones suggest that meat was carefully portioned, distributed fairly. Hearths in ancient settlements show evidence of group meals, charred bones, scattered seeds, tools, left behind after a night of storytelling around the fire. Why share instead of keep? Because sharing built alliances. It forged loyalty. In a world where tomorrow was never guaranteed, solidarity was the surest defense against disaster. The stakes were high and the danger very real. Hunters risked goring by enormous wild cattle or being trampled by panicked herds. Foragers faced snakes, sudden storms, or poisonous plants that looked deceptively safe. Yet each day they returned, driven by the simple truth that food meant life. And so they honed their skills to perfection. Hunters learned the behavior of animals, how they moved, when they drank, where they rested. Foragers learned to test unknown plants on their skin or their lips, waiting for reactions before daring a taste. Over time, this ancient science grew into a vast body of knowledge, an unwritten encyclopedia etched in memory. Pause for a moment. Try to imagine a young boy, only 10 winters old, crouched low in the grass beside his father, heart hammering. as they wait for the deer to approach, or a group of girls, barely teenagers, giggling as they pry apart stubborn clams along the seashore. Their laughter mingling with the cries of seabirds overhead. These were the apprentices of survival. From the moment they could walk, children were drawn into the food quest, learning skills that would one day keep their own children alive. And, as dusk fell, the tribe gathered to eat together, their bellies full, their fears quieted for a while. Around the fire, they shared tales of near misses, the aurochs that charged without warning, the hidden patch of honey-sweet berries found deep in a thorny thicket. These stories, told under starlight, did more than entertain. They taught. They preserved precious knowledge, cemented social ties, and reminded each person that survival was a collective act. It is easy to imagine Paleolithic life as brutal and mindless, but the truth is far richer. Hunting and gathering was a sophisticated, highly organized strategy that required cooperation and trust. No single person could master every skill, and no one could afford to go it alone. Their food quest was the beating heart of their existence, an endless cycle of effort, reward, and gratitude. So the next time you pick up a piece of fruit or sit before a steaming meal, consider this once. Every bite required courage, community, and a delicate balance with nature. The Paleolithic people knew that life was fragile, but through unity and knowledge, they triumphed day after day, season after season. And in the glow of their fires, they found not only nourishment, but the roots of what would one day become human civilization itself. After all, in the dance between hunger and plenty, between risk and reward, the Paleolithic food quest gave rise to something far greater than a full belly. It built a shared purpose, the very first spark of community, blazing defiantly against the darkness of the unknown. They held no factories, no blueprints, no mass-produced metal. Yet these Paleolithic humans carried in their minds something far more powerful, the knowledge of survival. And survival, in those harsh, unforgiving lands, meant tools. Not crude, mindless stones as once imagined, but carefully selected, shaped, and maintained instruments born of reason, observation, and inherited wisdom. Picture a small group of hunters on a wind-scoured plain. In their hands, flint blades glint beneath a pale sun honed to a lethal edge. These blades, known as scrapers, were no random shards. Each one was skillfully struck from a prepared stone core, its edge retouched and resharpened again and again. With such tools, hides could be scraped free of flesh, prepared for clothing, or shaped into shelters that turned the bitter winds away. But these stone tools were only the beginning. Paleolithic people, as far back as 2.6 million years ago, learned to see possibilities in almost every material the land offered. Antler bone, wood each was transformed by practiced hands into tools that extended the human body's strength and skill. Fire-hardened wooden spears, for instance, pushed the boundaries of hunting beyond simple brute force. These weapons were carefully carved from straight-grained wood, then slowly rotated over fire to toughen the sharpened point. Can you imagine the patience it demanded? The quiet concentration as a hunter turned the shaft over the embers, sensing just how close to bring the wood to the flame before charring weakened it. Archaeologists have found such spears preserved in ancient peat bogs, their points still strong enough to pierce the ribs of large game. One of the oldest known examples, the Schigningen spears from Germany, dates back 300,000 years, a staggering testament to human ingenuity. These were not the weapons of clumsy cavemen, but of skilled craftspeople who understood the forces at work when wood meets flesh and bone. Consider the spear point itself. Paleolithic people eventually learned to attach sharp stone points to wooden shafts, binding them with sinew or plant fibers and sometimes sealing the join with natural resin. This innovation transformed the spear from a mere stabbing stick into a true projectile weapon. With stone-tipped spears, humans could hunt at a safer distance, striking powerful animals with a deadly combination of momentum and razor-sharp flint. Such a leap in tool-making changed everything. From how food was obtained to how societies organized their hunts, the toolkit expanded further still. Burins, for example, were specialized tools with narrow, chisel-like tips, perfect for carving antler or bone into needles, hooks, and decorative objects. These were the instruments of a society no longer content with mere survival, but reaching for expression, ornament, and artistry. Even the simple scraper deserves our admiration. Think of a Paleolithic hunter returning with a blood-soaked hide from a mammoth kill. The scraper, repeatedly retouched on a flat anvil stone, stripped away fat and sinew, turning a heavy, rank hide into a flexible cloak against freezing winds. Every stroke was measured, practiced, guided by lessons learned across generations. Tools did not appear by accident. They were inherited memories made solid in stone. But why stop at stone? Bone awls, sharpened from long animal bones, served as piercing tools for sewing skins together, a fundamental skill that kept the community clothed and mobile. Imagine threading sinew through a hole in a reindeer hide, using a bone awl shaped generations before. Every stitch meant survival. Every stitch meant continuity. The Paleolithic toolkit was not static. It evolved, adapted, and innovated as new problems arose. Changing prey, shifting climate, rival human groups. All these pressures drove people to experiment with new designs, to refine the hafting of blades, to test new adhesives, to perfect the art of flint knapping itself. It was, in every sense, a quiet technological revolution. Listen, for a moment, the rhythm of a flint knapper's work, the calm tapping of stone against stone, the sudden sharp crack of a successful flake removed, each blow guided by practiced eyes. A mistake could shatter the core, wasting precious raw material. Success could mean meat on the fire, warmth through the winter, the very chance to go on living. Can we truly imagine the pride, the relief, the sense of triumph when a hunter tested the balance of a new spear or saw a scraper slice cleanly through hide? For us, they are museum relics. But for Paleolithic people, these were lifelines as vital as breath itself. And so, the Stone Age toolkit tells a story far more complex than simple survival. It is a story of ingenuity, of ancestral engineering passed down in words, gestures, and example. It is a story of trial, error, and hard-won knowledge. Above all, it is a story of hope that the next hunt would succeed. The next shelter would hold. The next child would live. Tools made them human. Tools made them masters of their fate. And with each blade, each point, each carefully crafted spear, the Paleolithic mind left an unmistakable mark on the world, a legacy of adaptation, innovation, and unbreakable determination. As the winds swept across the plains, carrying the voices of mammoth and wolf, these tools stood as silent allies, their edges shining, ready for the next challenge, the next day, the next age. When we imagine the homes of Paleolithic humans, a single image tends to dominate our minds. The rugged mouth of a cave, its walls dark with soot, a group of people huddled against the chill. But this picture is only part of a far more complex reality. Beyond the cave, our ancestors showed remarkable ingenuity in creating shelters that were as practical as they were symbolic structures that reflected their needs for protection, community, and survival. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of dwellings that would astonish anyone who thinks Paleolithic life was purely primitive. Picture a vast, windswept plain in what is now Ukraine, around 20,000 years ago. Here, groups of hunter-gatherers built circular huts from mammoth bones, carefully stacked and interlocked like the ribs of a colossal beast. These were no random piles of bones. They were engineered, stabilized with wooden poles and covered with animal hides to block the icy winds of the last ice age. Inside, the hearth glowed with steady warmth, its smoke drifting through a clever opening in the roof. In these shelters, families gathered to share food, stories, and knowledge. But what was it like inside these Paleolithic homes? The air would have been thick with the smell of burning wood and drying hides. The floor, often lined with grasses or soft furs, offered a modest comfort against the cold earth. Spaces were organized with surprising care. There might be a separate area for butchering meat, another for tool-making, and a spot where elders could rest. Children played near their parents, watched over not just by family, but by the entire group. For in a Paleolithic society, the community was the safety net. In cave shelters as well. Evidence suggests that humans created distinct zones for different activities. They painted the walls, yes, but they also cooked, worked, and even buried their dead within these stone chambers. Some archaeologists believe caves held deep symbolic power, representing a connection to the spirit world or to ancestors. Yet, even in the darkness of a cave, Paleolithic families showed a sense of order, adapting to their environment with remarkable skill. How did they maintain hygiene in such close quarters, you might wonder? Life in the Paleolithic was certainly harsh, but it was not mindless. People cleaned skins and hides, swept out debris, and disposed of animal remains at a distance from the main living area to limit disease and scavenger animals. Ash from hearth. Fires might have been used as a crude disinfectant sprinkled on waste to keep smells and insects away. Though we might see their practices as crude today, they were based on generations of observation and experience. And what of the children? In a world where every member's survival counted, children were cared for with fierce devotion. Infants were swaddled in fur, nursed and comforted, while older children learned to chip stone weave baskets or follow the hunters on quiet feet. Elders, too, held an honored place within these dwellings. Their memories, skills, and stories bound the community together, guiding younger generations through an unforgiving landscape. Imagine the soundscape of such a home. The crackle of a fire, the rasp of flint against bone, the gentle lullaby of a mother echoing under a hide roof. These were not empty caves echoing with silence. They were alive with voices, movement, and purpose. Each day demanded resourcefulness and courage, but it also offered moments of warmth and belonging. Moments we might recognize even today. Is it so different from our own sense of home? We, too, divide our spaces, protect our young, and honor our elders. We, too, build structures to shelter ourselves against a world that can be cold and dangerous. The Paleolithic home, whether shaped of mammoth bones or stone walls, was more than a shelter. It was a testament to the enduring human need for safety, identity, and family. These early humans did not simply survive. They built spaces where they could live, spaces where laughter, grief, and hope intertwined, spaces where the first sparks of culture burned as brightly as the fire at the center of the hearth. In their careful arrangements, in the way they nurtured children and respected their elders, they showed us that the roots of home, the true heart of human life, are far deeper than we might ever have imagined. And so, beyond the cave, in structures of bone, hide, and earth, Paleolithic families planted the seeds of the homes we know today. Their legacy is still with us, in every place we gather, every space we call our own. Because even at the dawn of our species, home was never just a shelter. It was a sanctuary of the human spirit. They were not just hunters or gatherers, these Paleolithic people. They were mothers, fathers, daughters, sons bound together by ties far stronger than simple survival. For them, the bond of community was the difference between life and death. When the biting winds of the last ice age howled through the valleys, when predators lurked in the shadows, when the earth itself seemed to conspire against them, These small bands of humans turned to each other. Their only real security was one another. Picture a group of 20 or 30 souls, huddled near the glow of a crackling fire. Each member of this band knew the others by sight, by scent, by the soft shuffle of their footsteps. Their lives were woven together so tightly that they could read each other's moods with a glance. These were not isolated cave dwellers, but complex, deeply social people whose survival depended on cooperation. When one of their hunters fell sick or was wounded by a bison's horn, the rest did not leave him behind. Instead, they shared their food, carried him on travois made of branches, dressed his wounds with plant medicines whose secrets had been passed down through generations. Even those too old to hunt had their place, watching the children, preserving precious stories, guiding younger members with hard-won wisdom. In this way, Paleolithic communities cared for their weak, their injured, their elders, because they understood an unspoken truth. Each life was part of the whole. Imagine a winter morning on the steppes. The hunters have returned with a mammoth haunch. The women gather around the fire, skillfully slicing meat, while children scamper nearby. The choicest cuts are offered first to the elderly, those who had taught the skills of survival in seasons past. It was a practice that honored their knowledge and secured the group's continuity. In the Paleolithic world, sharing was more than kindness. It was a binding contract of loyalty, a declaration that no one would face starvation alone. Trade, too, emerged from these bonds. Between neighboring bands, gifts of stone blades or shells passed hands, forming a delicate network of alliances. These exchanges were far more than economic transactions. They were woven into the language of trust and kinship. A polished flint point traded for a length of sinew might secure a future ally. A strand of beads, given in friendship, might ensure shelter during a harsh migration. These quiet transactions stitched together the wide tapestry of human survival, binding distant groups into a fragile yet powerful web of cooperation. At night, these bands came together around the flickering fire to share more than just meat or tools. They shared laughter, fear, hope, and stories. The storytellers, often the elders, conjured legends of spirits, animals, and ancestors. These stories were the glue that held a community's memory intact. They taught lessons, warned of dangers, and inspired courage in the face of hardship. Can you imagine how a child must have felt, drifting to sleep under a starlit sky, cradled by the voice of an elder retelling the feats of their ancestors? In these moments, they were not alone. They were bound to something far greater than themselves. Gatherings, whether for a successful hunt or the arrival of a traveling band, became powerful ceremonies of connection. Feasting, singing, dancing, these acts reminded them that they belonged, that their tiny group was a spark against the darkness of an unforgiving world. These communal rituals renewed social bonds, calmed rivalries, and cemented alliances, reinforcing the sense that each person had a place and a purpose. We often imagine Paleolithic humans as savage loners, clawing a living from the earth. But the evidence speaks otherwise. Archaeological finds show carefully healed bones, indicating that the injured were nursed for months, even years. Jewelry made of shells and ivory reveals networks of trade stretching for hundreds of miles. The ashes of great hearths and scattered pigments of red ochre tell of shared meals, shared dreams, and perhaps even shared beliefs. Their world was harsh, unpredictable, and cruel, yet within it burned a light of extraordinary cooperation. They built their communities on empathy, on generosity, on the simple but powerful knowledge that unity was their greatest weapon against extinction. It is a lesson that echoes across the millennia, a reminder to us, their distant descendants, that humanity's greatest strength has always been each other. And so, as we leave these Paleolithic bands behind, it is worth pausing to ask, in a world where each day was a battle, How did they find the courage to trust, to share, to care? Perhaps it was not courage at all, but simply wisdom, a wisdom we would do well to remember in the flickering glow of a Paleolithic fire. Shadows danced along the rough walls of a cave, shadows cast not only by the flames, but by something far more profound. Images of bison, mammoths, and mysterious human figures seemed to move as if alive, their pigments still vivid after tens of thousands of years. These cave paintings were not idle decorations. They were portals into the minds of our ancestors, silent witnesses to an extraordinary leap in human consciousness. Why did our ancestors paint these images? Why did they carve bone and stone with patient, deliberate strokes? These were not acts of idle pastime. They were powerful statements of identity, belief, and memory. Through these acts of symbolic expression, Paleolithic humans were giving voice to the intangible, to dreams, fears, and the unspoken mysteries of their world. In places like Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain, researchers have uncovered paintings more than 17,000 years old, portraying animals in breathtaking detail. These creatures were more than prey. They were symbols, woven into spiritual or even ritualistic meaning. Imagine standing in that dim cavern as a Paleolithic painter. Dipped a brush made of chewed twigs into iron oxide. The rich red color stained the stone, transforming blank rock into a living canvas. This was an act of transformation, a spell of sorts, turning the ordinary into something extraordinary. Perhaps the images were a plea for hunting success, or a way to honor the animal spirit. Or perhaps they were simply an expression of awe, a reminder that humans were part of a world filled with power. Feminine forms dating back as far as 30,000 years. These tiny sculptures might have been fertility symbols or expressions of social ideals. They could have served as ritual objects or even as teaching tools passed from generation to generation. Whatever their purpose, they point to one crucial truth. Paleolithic humans had the capacity for abstract thought and the desire to share it. Music, too, echoed through their world. Bone flutes dating back more than 40,000 years have been discovered in the caves of Germany. Their notes would have carried through the night air, perhaps during ceremonies, binding small bands of people together. Music was more than entertainment. It was a language without words, a force to strengthen group identity and soothe fears in a world where survival was always uncertain. What does this artistic legacy tell us? It tells us that Paleolithic humans were not simple, brutish creatures. They were capable of symbolic reasoning, the ability to let one thing stand for another, which is at the heart of human culture. Art, music, carvings. These were the earliest threads in a tapestry of meaning that would grow into the complex social worlds we know today. In every painted horse, in every haunting flute note, there lies evidence of a mind reaching beyond the present moment. These works carried lessons, memories, warnings, and hopes across the ages. They reflected a spiritual dimension to Paleolithic life, revealing a search for belonging, for purpose, for connection with forces beyond their understanding. So next time you see a photograph of a cave painting, or hear the delicate notes of a replica Paleolithic flute, ask yourself, what message did our ancestors wish to leave behind? What stories did they hope would outlive them? Perhaps in these echoes of art, we can find a mirror showing that the need to create, to believe, and to belong is as old as humanity itself. And so, from pigments on stone to melodies drifting into the night, Paleolithic art was more than art. It was the heartbeat of a people finding their place in a vast, mysterious world. They say the past is a distant, silent place. But is it? If we listen carefully, it still speaks to us. The world of the Paleolithic, though seemingly primitive at first glance, holds lessons that remain startlingly relevant today. In their stone tools, in their firelit gatherings, in their cautious but respectful relationship with the land. These early humans carried a wisdom that modern society so often forgets. We tend to see them as crude, violent, or barely thinking, but that is a tragic misunderstanding. They were, in truth, remarkable problem solvers, guided by instincts honed across millennia of survival. Imagine a Paleolithic band preparing for the winter. There is no supermarket to fall back on, no endless shelves of packaged food. They must plan their hunts carefully, ration their stores, share skills, and teach the next generation what plants to gather and what beasts to avoid. Wastefulness is not an option. It could mean death. In this way, sustainability was not a fashionable slogan, but a matter of life and death. Their relationship to resources was one of respect. Take only what you need, leave enough for tomorrow. For the children yet unborn, is that truly so different from what we need to remember today? We, too, face a world of finite resources and an uncertain climate. Where Paleolithic people learned to rotate their hunting grounds and not exhaust the herds, we must learn to guard our oceans, our forests, our soils. Their world, like ours, could be fragile. And so their quiet lessons about sustainability echo forward in time, within those small Paleolithic communities. Cooperation was the true wealth. No one person could master every skill. The napper shaping a flint blade, the tracker reading faint prints in the dust, the healer with knowledge of roots and herbs. These people had to teach each other, to share what they knew, or risk watching their band vanish. A single secret kept could doom them all. This culture of skill sharing, of open, interwoven knowledge, was their greatest insurance policy. Can we say we do the same today? Or have we locked knowledge behind walls, forgotten the power of communal wisdom? When the night fires burned, lo, and the children gathered close to hear stories of ancestors and spirits, those moments were not simply entertainment. They were lessons, reminders of kinship, warnings about the dangers of arrogance. They reinforced a sense of belonging and accountability. These myths and tales taught empathy, courage, and the humility to recognize one's place in a larger, natural order. Paleolithic people understood something modern life often obscures. The world is not ours to dominate, but to respect. We might ask ourselves, in our rush to control nature, have we lost sight of that? The Paleolithic mind was tuned to its surroundings with astonishing sensitivity. The changing angle of the sun, the tracks of migrating animals, the cycle of fruiting trees, they saw patterns where we see noise, and they adapted with breathtaking creativity. That is not primitive, that is advanced. It is the very definition of intelligence. When we look back at these ancestors, we should see not brutes, but problem solvers of the highest order, innovators who built a culture of resilience. We owe them our survival, and perhaps even our future. Their wisdom is not locked in the stones of a distant cave, but carried forward. If we choose to remember it, live sustainably, teach generously, and walk humbly upon the earth, so as we stand in our cities of steel and glass, gazing out at a world still full of challenges, let us not forget those ancient echoes. The Paleolithic way of life, shaped by respect for the land, by sharing of skills, and by fierce loyalty to the group, still has the power to guide us. In their memory, we might rediscover our own balance, because in the end, the greatest lesson of the ancestors is simple. Survival is not a solitary act. It is a shared story, one that continues, even now. They were not mindless brutes, nor were they doomed to lives of unending terror and struggle. The Paleolithic people, so often reduced in our imagination to club-wielding cavemen, were in truth masters of their world. They were innovators, adapting tools with a precision and creativity that echoes through millennia. They were artists, leaving behind breathtaking images on cave walls, capturing the soul of the animals they depended upon, and perhaps even telling stories as vivid as any we might share today. And they were members of complex communities bound by social ties, customs, and shared beliefs that helped them survive in a world that was often as beautiful as it was unforgiving. Look closely at their legacy. In the shape of a finely flaked flint blade, we see the spark of human ingenuity. In the delicate patterns of ochre and charcoal on limestone, we see a longing to leave a mark, to say we were here. We felt, we dreamed. And in the graves where the bodies of loved ones were laid to rest with care, sometimes with ornaments or red pigment, we glimpse a humanity that mourned, that remembered, that loved. These are not the signs of mindless beasts. They are the fingerprints of people who lived with purpose, people who carried a kind of knowledge we still struggle to fully comprehend. Imagine the courage it took to face each day in the Paleolithic. No grocery stores, no hospitals, no certainty of tomorrow. And yet, they thrived, forging tools from the bones of their prey, crafting needles to sew furs against the biting cold, and finding ways to share food so no one was left behind. They knew the land in a way few of us ever will, reading every scent on the wind, every flicker of animal tracks, every change in the rhythm of the seasons. They were, in the truest sense, survivors, but more than that, they were people who found meaning even in the face of constant danger. What does that teach us today? In a world of climate threats, pandemics, and a seemingly endless cascade of change, could we reclaim some of that ancient resilience? Could we rediscover the sense of community, of shared struggle and triumph that helped our Paleolithic ancestors to overcome? Their lives were short by modern standards, yet they left behind echoes of courage, cooperation, and innovation that still resonate within us. The next time you hear the word caveman, pause for a moment. Picture not a grunting savage, but a skilled stoneworker, a loving parent, an artist crouched by flickering firelight mixing pigments. Picture a people whose entire existence depended on one another, who held together through hunger, fear, and loss, because they knew that alone they would not last, but together they could thrive. In the glow of their ancient hearths, we see ourselves. We see the roots of everything we call human today. Their triumphs and their failures shaped our story. Their innovations lit the first spark that would eventually become cities, nations, and even the devices on which you hear these words now. So, perhaps the greatest lesson of the Paleolithic is not about survival alone. It is about endurance with empathy, innovation with purpose, art that reaches across centuries to remind us we have always been more than we think. If we could take even a fraction of their resilience, their ingenuity, their sense of belonging, what might we build today? What could we face together? That alone might defeat us. The Paleolithic people are not relics of a savage past. They are reminders of what humanity is capable of, then, now, and tomorrow. Because in the end, we are all still carrying a piece of them inside us, whether we remember it or not.